a little closer to my hometown, so I moved up here in 2020 and I've been the property manager at JP ever since. So yeah, I'll go over kind of a little bit about Jasper-Pulaski and what we do here, and then obviously what we're known for is the Sandhill Crane, so we'll talk a little bit about that tonight too. So yeah, Jasper-Pulaski Fish and Wildlife Area, or as we like to abbreviate, just JPFWA. It was Indiana's first official fish and wildlife area. It was started in 1929, and we're just shy of 8,200 acres. And it's wetlands, what would have historically been oak savanna. We're restoring some of that along with partners, DNR Nature Preserves, which is another part of Fish and Wildlife. And then also the Nature Conservancy, or TNC, owns quite a bit of property in the area, and they have some really nice high quality oak savannas around here as well. Another kind of key part of our property is we have some rotational ag fields, and that provides food for the wildlife. Cranes like to feed in ag fields quite a bit, and then also it helps us keep areas open for that early succession habitat, that good weedy or grassy habitat that quail and other critters like. But yeah, we have pretty much all the wildlife you're gonna find in Northwest Indiana, you'll find at JP. A lot of deer, a lot of turkeys, small game as well, quail, rabbit, squirrels. And then you'll see a lot of waterfowl in the marshes besides cranes. So ducks, geese, coots, shorebirds at times if the water's drawn down. And then, like I mentioned, a couple of the nature preserves around here, Teff Savannah and then Coastal Plain Ponds Nature Preserve are located at JP. So a couple sections of the property are managed as nature preserves. And then just a little bit of our funding. So the bulk of our funding is derived from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and then the Pittman-Robertson Act. And the Pittman-Robertson Act is the federal excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and hunting equipment. And then that's divvied back up to the states based on how many hunting licenses we sell and the amount of match money we have. So bulk of our funds are coming from that federal tax. Mhm. All right, so yeah, here I just got a little aerial map of the property. You can see around the center of the property there, we have some of our bigger wetland units, and that's a waterfowl resting area. So that's actually closed down this time of the year to most visitors. It's open for a few select waterfowl hunters that we do a daily drawing for, and then also deer archery. But other than that, it's closed right now. And it's only open to hunting in the morning, so we can let cranes come in there and roost in the evening, and waterfowl, ducks and geese can come in there as well without getting bumped around. And then that kind of leads us into the wetlands. And like I mentioned, they're mainly in the center of the property, and depending on water levels, we have around 1,000 to 2,000 acres of that 8,000 acres of property is wetlands. This fall it's really dry. We've kind of had a drought going on since September, and we're right at the edge of moderate to getting to severe drought now. It's been a pretty dry fall. Uh, luckily, luckily cranes don't need a whole lot of water, so they can still get out there and roost in that knee-deep water, which is what they prefer. Um, but we have both natural and man-made wetlands. The property would have been historically wet before European settlement. Kind of those sandy ridges that were oak savanna, and then between them, there's some natural swales that would have held water. A lot of that was farmed as people moved into the area and drained. And then when the state bought it, in the 20s and then 30s and 40s, the place was a CCC camp, so Civilian Conservation Corps. And there was a lot of federal employees that did work here. And one of the first things they did was levied up some of those natural wet areas and augmented some of the wetlands. And that's what we do now. We do a lot of work maintaining those levees and replacing aging water control structures. And yeah, uh, what else I got on this slide? So I think I already mentioned it, but wetlands are important crane roosting habitat. And then in the spring, we have a lot of nesting wood ducks, and we have some cranes that nest on the property, as well as mallards and a lot of Canada geese. And then the summer, those wetlands are important for mainly the wood ducks, um, raising their young. So we have a lot of button brush sloughs and some of that woody cover, which makes ideal brood rearing habitat. And then in the fall, this time of year, we're obviously a very important stopover for sandhill cranes. And we also get quite a few ducks and geese. And like you can see in this picture, occasionally American white pelicans. We see them in the fall some, and then also in the spring. We usually have a pretty good flock out there. Few pictures of our wetland management. This was a big overhaul we did a couple years ago. I think it was actually 21. And we had a water control structure that was failing. And again, we had a drought that year. So the marsh was pretty much already dry. We went ahead and finished drawing it down all the way. And we were able to add a new water control structure. And essentially, what most of those water control structures are is a riser connected to a culvert on both sides. And then inside of that culvert, you can add stop logs. And those stop logs are just tongue and groove boards. And you can add those. And as you add those, you stop the flow of water and the wetland increases in size. And then what we typically do would be pull some of those boards down in the spring and the summer, and that exposes mud flats as the water goes down. Shorebirds really like to use those mud flats. And then as they dry out, they grow up with good annual vegetation, stuff like smartweeds, wild millet, barnyard grass, and those plants provide a lot of annual seeds and good food for ducks and geese, and then sandhill cranes as well. And then typically we'd like to start putting those boards back in the early fall with the intent to catch some fall rains, and that vegetation that's grown up over the summer will flood, and that food becomes available for ducks and geese. And also it'd provide good roosting habitat for cranes. Unfortunately this year, we haven't had too many fall rains, so a lot of the wetlands are still pretty dry. We do have a couple we're able to pump, and actually this wetland here in the picture is Heron Marsh, and we've been able to add a little water to that from the ditch. But if we catch a rain tonight or next week like they're calling for, hopefully some of the wetlands that are still dry will fill up and we'll have more available habitat to ducks and cranes, but we'll see. And then this summer, kind of a multi-year project with Ducks Unlimited. We came up with a design. Ducks Unlimited helped us do that design, and then they actually kicked in some money to help us buy some new water control structures. And that picture there on the left is one of the new aluminum structures they bought us. And they rented that mini excavator for us, and we put two new water control structures in. These are both on the south side of the refuge, which is the area in front of the Sandhill Crane Tower. And we built a small levee there along the road. You can see it from 850, the county road that goes right past our entrance here. And our intent is that hopefully we can end up with these two blue areas here. The one on the left side of the screen is the west side of the refuge, and the one on the bottom of the screen there is the south side. That yellow star in the middle is the Crane Observation Tower. So if you've ever been here before, if you were looking straight out from the tower, you'd be able to see what we're hoping to get, about 75 acres of water here. We added one water control structure and the natural swale of the ground. Once we get a couple good rains, we should be able to get Probably not the full 75 acres, but I'm thinking around 50. Last March, we had this to almost full service level. And then this past summer, that the previous two pictures, that yellow line there at the bottom of the screen is the levee we built, and we added two water control structures there. So I'm hoping this winter, if we pick up some rains, we should have that there. And that'll be 25 acres shallow wetland, and that'll also be viewable from the crane tower. It'll actually be closer to the crane tower. And that was a historically, all that area in front of the crane tower has been managed as kind of open pasture. They planted winter wheat out there rotationally. And their original plan with that was Canada goose pasture. And they used to get quite a few Canada geese here. Um, Still a lot of Canada geese in Northwest Indiana, but they mainly nest here. And they don't really hang out at JP in the fall and winter in large numbers like they used to. And as the goose use kind of slacked off, we started getting cranes. And cranes also like to use that winter wheat field. And the two fields to the north are ag fields that they feed in. But our hope is with these wetlands, we'll get cranes using the wetlands to roost in. And then you'll also be able to see ducks and hopefully some other critters from the crane tower that you wouldn't typically see in the dry fields that are out there now. And then this is, like I mentioned, that the blue area on the previous map to the west of the tower. We had finished that last fall. And then this March, we got some good rains and had some nice sheet water out there, probably 40 to 50 acres. And you can see there's a lot of duck use, and we actually had quite a few swans out there. And there's no sandhill cranes in this picture, but there was a lot of sandhill crane use on those wetlands as well. So hopefully it'll look like that some point this fall or winter if we pick up some rain. Lost my cursor. Here we go. And then to get into some more detail about cranes. So our cranes that visit Jasper-Pulaski are part of the eastern population of greater sandhill cranes. And they're really a great conservation success story. In the 1950s, there was fewer than 1,000 cranes recorded at JP. Um, in the 50s, I don't know when they were designated as a threatened species, but early 1900s, when wildlife conservation kind of got its foothold and stuff started getting protected and game laws came into effect, the eastern population of cranes were listed as threatened species. And then in 1973, they were able to come off the threatened list, and they've continued to grow steadily every year. And around, I think the last time the feds came out with a population estimate was still 2022. I don't think that's been updated. And there was just under 110,000. So healthy population. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Mississippi Flyway Council decided that population was healthy enough to allow hunting in 2010. And they opened, so how that works is the Flyway Council and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service basically leaves that up to the states and the Mississippi Flyway. They set sideboards on what the states can have as a hunting season. And then a few of those states adopted hunting seasons. Currently, Kentucky, Alabama, and Tennessee are the only states that hunt the eastern population of sandhill cranes. And those hunting seasons are very restrictive. They set a total harvest that those states are allowed to do, and then they sell hunting licenses and then specific crane tags. And in 2020 and 21, they only harvested 1,086 birds. So very small amount of the population. So yeah, over time you can see as the eastern population of sandhill cranes grew, the count at Jasper-Pulaski grew as well. And we'll typically the end of November, beginning of December is when we see our high count. and that high count is anywhere from 20 to 30,000. With our highest count taking place in 2003, and that was 35,000 cranes. So figure the population's just over 100,000, and that's a third of the population here at any one time. So that's pretty neat. Really highlights how important this property is, that a whole third of that eastern population of cranes can be here at one time. I would expect that even more of that pass through over the fall, because I believe the way them cranes work is some of the birds will show up, rest here for a little bit, use the surrounding ag fields and feed, build up their energy reserves, and then they migrate out and more cranes come in. So I would expect probably over half of the population of sandhill cranes are coming through Jasper-Pulaski at some point in the fall. And then I have big long link there at the bottom. If you guys go to that website there, you can follow the Sandhill Crane counts. We start counting at the beginning of October and we go to the end of December. And that usually what we're trying to do there is just catch that peak and see trends across the years of mainly timing of when that peak occurs. When they first started counting in the 70s, they typically see that peak in mid-October, and now it's shifted later and later, and we're seeing that peak at the end of November, beginning of December. Oh yeah, and if you don't want to type in that big link down there, if you just Google Jasper-Pulaski Sandhill Cranes, first page that come up should be our JP Sandhill Crane page, and there's some tips about how to view cranes here, and then also, like I said, you can follow that count online and sign up for email alerts as well. Few pictures of nesting sandhill cranes. Cranes typically nest north of Jasper-Pulaski, Michigan, Wisconsin, southern Canada, but they do nest in Indiana as well. The last nesting sandhill cranes were in 1929, and then as that population began to grow, in 1982, there was cranes again recorded nesting in northeast Indiana. And now they're pretty common across the whole, probably maybe northern quarter of the state. We usually have 6 to 10 pairs that nest at Jasper-Pulaski, and they raise those young that they call colts. They're pretty neat little brown tawny birds. And then as I was talking earlier, there's a slide there kind of highlighting those birds that are nesting in Wisconsin, Canada, Minnesota, Michigan. And they're this time of year, they're leaving their nesting grounds and going down to their wintering grounds in Florida and Georgia, Tennessee, places like that. You kind of draw that funnel line down to Florida and it comes right over the top of Jasper-Pulaski. So geographically, just a good location here at the southern tip of Lake Michigan as those birds migrate south around the edges of the lake. And then also we got really good habitat. They utilize the wetlands for roosting, and there's large acreages of ag fields around. And it's, yeah, made Jasper-Pulaski what it is today, known for those large numbers of sandhill cranes in the fall. And like I was talking about earlier, might be a little hard to see on this graph, but that peak has shifted from October in the 70s when they first started counting to now at the end of November, beginning of December. And I think that's, largely a shift in weather. Winters aren't quite as severe as they used to be. So cranes don't get pushed from those northern climates as early as they used to. Also, it seems like we kind of have there's two personalities of cranes. Seems like two techniques they use when it comes to migration. There's the birds that migrate on time of year and photo period. So fall starts coming around. We see a trickle of cranes in September and October, and those cranes are just migrating regardless of weather, just because it's time of year. They know it's time to head south. And then as this graph represents those birds that hold out, I think that's the other group of cranes that want to stay until the weather's too bad. And once those marshes to the north of here start freezing over, the cranes don't have available water. That's when they have to move south. They can't wait any longer. So that's when we typically see our big push of birds. If we have a cold weather event, the end of November, beginning of December, we'll go from 3 to 4 thousand cranes to bam, 20, 30,000 cranes. And that's those shallow wetlands, they need to roost freeze over. Snow starts flying, starts covering the fields where they feed, and they come south. And then once they get to JP, a typical fall day, how they operate when they're here is they leave the roost in the morning, typically around sunrise. Sometimes if the weather's bad, it's rainy and dark and cloudy, they'll stick around a little later than sunrise. But they're roosting out there in those wetlands, 12 to 18 inches of water, about knee deep on a crane. And they fly out from there and they head out to the surrounding agriculture fields to feed, typically feeding on waste grain, any leftover corn or beans left behind after the farmers pick. And then in the evening, about, I'd say they start about an hour before sunset and then go until half hour after sunset when it's complete dark. Those cranes start flying back into the marshes and they come over that refuge area in front of the observation tower. A lot of them typically stop out there and they kind of socialize and loaf, and they do a little bit more feeding before they head into the wetlands there in the center of their property to roost again for the night. And that's what makes a really good time to see them there when they're coming back in the evening. And then we typically get the big question of how do we count them? So on this map here, the yellow circles represent the 5 areas that we post folks up. And we have 5 DNR employees that go out every Tuesday morning. We head out before sunrise, before the cranes start leaving the roost. And we get to our post. We have them spread out around the property, so we all try to count different cranes to make sure we're not counting the same birds twice. And as those birds fly out from the roost to the surrounding fields, that's the best time to count them. Because once you're getting in the 10, 20, 30,000, it's hard to count them all at one time sitting on the ground. They kind of tend to trickle out in small flocks, and that's the easiest time to count large numbers like that, is as they're coming out in 10s, 20s, 30s. Um, Typical count lasts about an hour and a half. We'll let the cranes fly out for a while on their own, and then my assistant manager, Steven, typically drives through the marsh after about an hour of observing, and he'll count any cranes left on the roost that don't flush when he drives out. And then we also get quite a few birds through here in the spring. We don't get the large numbers of cranes in the spring, so those cranes kind of stage here in the fall, and then as they make their way farther south, the numbers build. But in the spring, they seem to be headed back north in a hurry. I think they're wanting to get to those nesting locations as the weather warms up, and they don't really stage at Jasper-Pulaski very long. So we still see a handful of cranes in the spring, but we're not getting the big 20, 30,000 numbers that we are in the fall. We do have our highest duck numbers in the spring. So if you're ever interested in seeing other wetland birds besides cranes, I recommend that March and April timeframe. Um, Also, after goose season in February, the waterfowl refuge, or sorry, waterfowl resting area is open to the public as well. So it's open up to bird watchers and stuff. If you want to get into the marsh and look around, do some bird watching, that's the time of the year to do it. Also see pelicans, white-fronted geese, and then have turns on there, but those are typically in the summer. But yeah, we have a lot of diving ducks, and then as we draw the water down in some of those wetlands in the spring, you'll see quite a few shorebirds as well. And then hopefully a couple future projects, or one future project we're working on now is new office and visitor center. We've been in the planning stages here for going on 2 years, but have a little rendering there of what we hope the interior will look like and the outside. If you've been to Goose Pond Fish and Wildlife Area, that's kind of what we're shooting for. Big, nice open space that we can have displays in, hopefully interpretive naturalist, and be able to better serve the public. Folks can come in there and we can kind of tell them the story of Jasper-Pulaski instead of just standing out at the crane tower. See what happens with the federal shutdown and stuff. We don't exactly know what our funding is going to be in the next 2 years, but once they get the government open back up, hopefully they approve our funding for this building and we can get rolling on that and keep our opening date of potentially 2027, but we will see. So some tips for visiting. Like I mentioned, usually the best times around sunset. Sunrise is also a pretty good time to see them. If you want to beat the crowds, I'd recommend sunrise. We typically don't see as many people at sunrise, but you can still see a good amount of cranes. And then the observation tower, I should have put a map here. If you've never been here before, it's located just west of our main entrance. So our main entrance is located about a mile west of 421 on 143. And if you go past our office entrance, County Road 1650s, about an eighth of a mile past our entrance. Turn north there, there's a large asphalt parking lot. You can park there, and then we have a paved path that goes up to the crane tower. The crane tower is ADA accessible. Um, has a large ramp leading up to it, and it has two staircases. And we have a part of the tower under roof, so if there's inclement weather, if it's raining a little bit, you can get up there, get out of the weather. We do have a couple spotting scopes, permanent spotting scopes mounted up there, and one permanent set of binoculars mounted on the crane tower. We do recommend you, if you have them, bring your own binoculars, your own spotting scopes. The cranes aren't always in easy view of the tower; they might be a few hundred yards away. And in November, it's typically pretty busy at sunset, so that tower can be shoulder to shoulder. No guarantee you're gonna no guarantee you're gonna get to a scope. Um, and then if you come here early before the cranes are really flying back into the property, we like to recommend travel the county roads largely to the south of the property. You can see cranes to the north as well, but there's been a lot of solar development to the northwest of here, and cranes aren't using the field as much up there by the solar. They do use the crop fields next to the solar, but they're not going to get in there and use the areas that used to be corn that are all solar now. But yeah, if you drive some of those gravel county roads south of the property, you'll see the cranes out feeding during the day. And then once they start coming back to the marsh, good time to come back to the property and get up on the crane tower and get a good view of them flying back in. Also like to recommend just keep your distance, about 200 yards, so you're not spooking cranes if you're somewhere besides the crane tower. And then also, the rest of the property is open besides the waterfowl resting area, like I mentioned. You're welcome to get out and look around and hike, but just be aware this time of year there are other hunting seasons open. Deer firearm season starts November 16th, though, so that's a busy time of year for us. But and then International Crane Foundation has been working with us. They're going to have a volunteer at the crane tower to help answer questions about whooping cranes and sandhill cranes, and they're going to be here every Saturday from October 25th to December 13th. So if you want to come out here on a Saturday evening, they'll be out there to help answer any questions you might have. And another event we have coming up, Crane Foundation and Audubon will be out at the Crane Tower on November 22nd from 2 to 6 Eastern Time. And Audubon's been doing that for a few years. It's kind of their crane open house. They have a little table set up to talk about Audubon Society, and then International Crane Foundation will be there as well to answer questions and talk about the ICF a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of my quick presentation about JP and Sandhill Cranes. And if anybody has any questions, you guys have time, I'll open up for them.
Okay. I will forward questions from the room, but also people want to throw them in chat from online. Go ahead. All right, so we got a question about whooping cranes. Do you guys get many?
We do not. We do occasionally see them at the property. That's a picture of a few of them at the property there. I don't know when that was taken. That was a shared file I had. But I think I've seen them actually at Jasper-Pulaski once in the 5 years I've been here. Typically they utilize NIPSCO power plant, which is just northwest of here. There's a lot of sandhill cranes that roost at that power plant too, but usually 2 or 3 whooping cranes stay at that power plant and then feed in the ag fields north of the town of Wheatfield. So if you're coming to Jasper-Pulaski, look up Wheatfield, Indiana, drive around some of them county roads to the north, and you got a better bet spotting a whooper up there.
That's a nice tip. I like that. Other questions from the room? Yes. Do you guys still have the handicap parking up by the crane tower?
We do. Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I mentioned there's the big parking lot, and then there is a small ADA lot closer to the tower. There's about 15 or 20 spots there, so plenty of handicap parking. Makes it a lot closer of a walk.
All right, we've got a bunch of questions coming in via chat. Do you have access to that?
Okay, yep, I got it opened up. So someone locally in Illinois, survival rates of colts do not seem to be great. Do you have numbers for JP? No, we don't do any actual tracking of nests or survival. I had mentioned nesting cranes. That's just observations from me. I know we've raised a few, but I think we have problems as well because we've noticed some young colts, and then I'm not sure many of them have made it to fledging. And I'm unfortunately we have pretty high predator rates on fish and wildlife areas too. I think it just kind of goes along with having good wildlife habitat. Yeah, have good predator habitat as well. Do sandhill cranes migrate as family groups, and do the youngsters still look different from adults in the fall? They do migrate as family groups. That's part of the reason it makes it easy to count them when they're coming out of the marsh because they're in those smaller 6 to 12 bird flocks. Um, and no, the young ones do not look different right now, but they sound different. The adults have that typical sandhill crane trumpet that you think of when you hear cranes, and then the juveniles have like kind of a whistle sound. If you're out there, you'll hear it. It's a lot higher pitched and not that typical trumpet. That's the best way to tell them apart right now. Someone asked if they migrate at night or during the day. Cranes primarily seem to migrate during the day. ducks and other waterfowl seem to migrate at night, but we see big flocks of cranes coming in during the day. You get that kind of tornado effect above the property and see them coming down from way up there. It's pretty neat. Have migration times. Yeah, I think I mentioned it, but yeah, the migration, have they changed in previous years? Yeah, they've changed over the years. So we'd see our peak numbers in October in the 70s, and now we get that peak number end of November, beginning of December. I think it's always been the same time frame, but I think the bulk of birds migrating has shifted later and later.
Cool.
I think that was all the chat questions.
Yeah, that's what I've got. Any other room questions? All right. The final note. Oh, we've got one more chat question.
What crops? See them a lot in both corn and bean fields. I think they seem to favor corn. I think that's better high energy food for migration, build up them fat reserves before they migrate rest of the way south.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, the final note here, we've got, if you haven't checked the newsletter, we've got Elena Nelson leading a field trip on the 6th of December, I believe. Double check the drummings, but okay, yeah. So we do have a club field trip down there, and she also mentioned Will County has I believe is the Forest Preserves are running a tour bus to Jasper-Pulaski one weekend. So lots of different opportunities. It's a fantastic place to visit. One of my favorites. And I think I'd like to say thank you, Nick, for the presentation this evening. And sure you get a round of applause from the folks online in the room. And thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good evening.